it's two of them here. You've got the Navy spread out and well around the area of Iran. On the Strait of Hormuz, Matt was touching on this a little bit. There's these little islands that are not a lot of people live there. In fact, they're just manned on behalf of the Iranian military. And they're right here in the Strait of Hormuz. If I can go ahead and pop this up for you. You know, this waterway here gets very narrow and it gets very shallow too, especially at low tide. But these islands here, I'll go in one more thing. These are part of the Naziat Islands, okay? And you've got Abu Musa, Greater Tomb, Lesser Tomb. Why are they significant? They're essentially beachheads in the middle of this strait that can be manned on behalf of the Iranians, and they can be manned with anti-ship missiles. And they've been hit a couple times now by the U.S. And the Israeli military. So I'll just come over here and show you a little bit of what the satellite imagery is showing us. On one of these islands, Abu Musa that I just mentioned right there, you can have a port here on behalf of the Iranian military. All right, this is the before picture. Slide on over here, Jimmy, and I'll show you the other strike damage here. That building is gone. It's just been entirely removed. Here's another island here. I'll point to two things on the map here. This building here and this hangar over here have both been targets, all right? This is the before image. Pop on over here, and that one's gone, and that one's gone as well. Why could this be significant? If the Marines or the 82nd Airborne is going to take territory, you know, somewhere in the Strait of Hormuz, these would be the islands you would man in part to make sure that shipping lines are safe to go through. It's a big challenge. Robert O'Brien joins me now to talk about this and whether or not getting anywhere in these talks. And sir, welcome back to our coverage. It's good to have you.
Good to be with you, Bill.
We have the list of the Iranian demands so far. And I'll just tick them off. Closing all military bases in the Persian Gulf is one. The payment of the reparations for the attacks on Iran. You've got an order for the Strait of Hormuz that allows Iran to charge transit fees to the waterway. And there's like 4 or 5 other things on here that I cannot see the Americans agreeing to. How do you go about this?
Well, Bill, that's not going to happen. That's an Iranian, fairy tale wish list. President Trump has been very clear on this from the start. He sent Jared and Steve Witkoff to Geneva and to Oman before the Operation Epic Fury. And he said, look, Iran, you have to dismantle your nuclear program. You have to take out your ballistic missile program. And you have to stop paying your proxies. You have to stop paying Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis to attack Israel and the U.S. and shipping it in the region. That's it. And if you don't do it, we're going to hit you. And the Iranians came back and reportedly said that they were going to build 10 nuclear bombs. And they got Epic Fury in response. Now, after a month of war, a month of Iran being pounded, President Trump has all the leverage again in the negotiations, and we'll see what the Iranians are going to do.
And we'll see if they sit down, which has not been confirmed either.
Yeah.
Here's the president yesterday talking about this prize. Go ahead and roll this here.
They're going to make a deal. They did something yesterday that was amazing, actually. They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. It was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. It wasn't nuclear related. It was oil and gas related. And it was a very nice thing they did. But what it showed me is that we're dealing with the right people.
Okay. How do you interpret that when you read between the lines based on the people you're talking to? What's that mean?
Well, look, Bill, the whole regime was wiped out. From the Ayatollah down, the top 50 leaders in the regime were taken out. So we need some sort of proof that the people we're talking to actually have the authority to negotiate. And so my guess is, and I don't know, I haven't talked to the president about this, but my guess is that they let a tanker through or something of that nature to show that they had the authority to negotiate, kind of a proof of authority. They've done that, and now the negotiations can start, and we'll see if they can fulfill their obligations if that they agree to.
There's one report, Iranian English television is saying that just crossed the wires about 7 minutes ago from the AP that they're denying the initial offer on behalf of the Americans. Stand by on that. John Brennan used to run the CIA. Have you been watching some of these comments? Just go ahead and play the clip about how he trusts the Iranians more than the American president.
Well, I tend to believe Iran more than I do Donald
Trump
because he could not acknowledge the truth, even when it is he's slapped in the face with it repeatedly. He's going to make these claims about negotiations, that the Iranians now are sending signals that they really want to make a deal, and indicates that they're going to make a deal on our terms. I don't think anything close to the truth in that statement.
Who are they cheering for?
Well, this is no surprise coming from Brennan, unfortunately, and sadly, he did so much damage to the CIA with his Russiagate hoax, and he's been a very bad actor in the intelligence community, and he's done lasting damage to America. And now the fact that he's basically shilling for the Iranians and criticizing the president of the United States, which I would have never done that with Biden or Obama, and most Republicans wouldn't have. But the fact that he's basically rooting for the Iranians is really a heartbreak to see a former official do that.
No doubt. Robert, good to see you again.
Thank you, Bill. Nice seeing you.
So for the best, maybe this comes together. We'll see. Robert O'Brien, thanks for your time. Right about 20 minutes now past the hour, President Trump sounding optimistic about talks with Iran, saying that negotiators have made progress on at least one major point.
It all starts with they cannot have a nuclear weapon. I said yesterday, they said, what are the top 10? I said, well, number 1, 2, and 3 is they can't have a nuclear weapon. And they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. And we're talking about that. And I don't want to say in advance, but they've agreed they will never have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that.
That from Tuesday, now on Wednesday morning. Peter Ducey picks it up, North Lawn, White House. Peter, nice to see you. Good morning.
Bill, good morning. And that is a big step closer to the end of Epic Fury, if Epic Fury was started to stop Iran from getting a nuke. Now officials here are floating a 15-point peace plan to end the war once and for all.
It was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. And I'm not going to tell you what that present is, but it was a very significant prize. It wasn't nuclear related. It was oil and gas related. And it was a very nice thing they did. But what it showed me is that we're dealing with the right people.
Part of the problem is that part of the group that created all these problems in Iran, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, has a spokesman saying about these negotiations, have your internal conflicts reached the point where you are negotiating with yourselves? Our first and last word has been the same from day one, and it will stay that way. Someone like us will never come to terms with someone like you. But President Trump is suggesting that the old guard is out of the mix.
We killed all their leadership. And then they met to choose new leaders, and we killed all of them. And now we have a new group, and we can easily do that. But let's see how they turn out. We have really regime change. This is a change in the regime because the leaders are all very different than the ones that we started off with that created all those problems.
President Trump is still really frustrated by a lack of help with the war effort from NATO allies, but he says with this war, America's allies in the Gulf have been pretty good. Bill?
All right, Peter, thank you. Peter Ducey kicking off the day there at the White House. Dana.
Let's bring in Brian Hook. He's a former U.S. Special Representative for Iran, so you know this well. I want to pull up here. Apparently, these are the U.S. and Iran missile constraints, guaranteed free and safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, and an end to Iran's proxy support in the region. There's several things that Iran is demanding, like compensation for the war and a new payment system for the Strait of Hormuz. But also, you just heard Peter Ducey say that at least state media is telling the world that Iran is not having any of these discussions. Based on your experience, where do you think it actually stands?
Well, Dana, where I think it stands, we're at a fascinating moment that has eluded so many American presidents. And President Trump seems to have Iran where every president has wanted to have Iran, which is under pressure and coming to us for a deal. And historically, if you look at either President Obama or President Biden, it was the reverse. We were under pressure because of Iranian nuclear blackmail, and then we would give into the pressure, and then we would chase Iran all over Europe, trying to get some sort of deal, which ended up being the Iran nuclear deal, which President Trump was right to leave. Now we have this dynamic where the Iranian regime is certainly feeling the heat, and they're looking for some sort of off-ramp. And so this is a really important moment. It's a sign of possible progress.
I'm going to put up on the board for everyone to see the leaders who have been killed, but there's also some that the president might be able to work with and talk to. I don't know if you know this parliament speaker, Galiba, if I'm saying that correctly. Do you think the United States or anyone of our allies in the Gulf who want us to keep making sure that we get at least the demands that President Trump is asking for in regards to nuclear weapons, can that guy be dealt with, the parliament speaker?
I think this is an encouraging sign that the speaker is now coming forward. It seems to be that he's the person potentially on the other side of the table. And this is a good development because when you're dealing with the Iranian regime, it's not a normal country. And if you're sitting across from the foreign minister, that's often theater and smokescreen. But this speaker of the Iranian parliament is the former IRGC leader, and he's real. He's an important guy in the system. And so when I think about this, you had Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner doing talks with the Iranians in Oman and in Geneva. I think those talks were productive. But ultimately, Iran could not get out of its own way, and they over-negotiated with them, and they didn't take our demands seriously. But now I think we're at a moment after now almost a month of war where we may have the right people potentially at the table, and they're looking at this list, and Dana, you showed it on screen earlier. That's the right set of demands around the nuclear weapons, the missiles, and the proxies. Those have to be resolved once and for all.
Brian, new sound from former Secretary Tony Blinken has just come in. I understand this is from Harvard last night. I have not heard it yet. Apparently expressing some regret about actions that they did or did not take. Let's listen to it together and get your reaction on the other side. Here's the former Secretary of State under President Biden.
You kept referring to an agreement that was longer and stronger.
That's right.
And you never got there.
Yep.
Given what's going on in the world, is that a regret?
Yeah, it is. I wish we had gotten there. We worked very hard on getting that longer and stronger agreement. And I think at various points, we were really leaning into it. The Iranians were leaning back. At other points, they were leaning in. And we had our own constraints. I'll acknowledge, too, that sometimes politics gets in the way. You have midterm elections. It shouldn't be, but it is too often a factor.
Now, Brian, you and I and our audience are hearing those comments from Secretary Blinken for the first time. Do you have an immediate reaction to that?
Well, the problem with that whole line of diplomacy that he pursued is he had no leverage. And the Iranian regime did not fear President Biden. They just simply didn't take him seriously. And so his negotiators didn't really have much power. It's just the reverse now. President Trump's negotiators have leverage and they have power. And there is, the negotiating table is not balanced. It's imbalanced in favor of the United States. And that was something that completely eluded the Biden administration. And they were always chasing the Iranians for a deal. They were trying so desperately to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. And so now I think the United States is in a much better position, and the president has used pressure and diplomacy very well.
Brian Hook joining us from Miami today. Thank you so much.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Breaking news right now, Fox has just learned that the Pentagon is deploying more troops to the Middle East. It is part of the president's plans, moves to give the U.S. more options as he works now to negotiate with Iran's leaders. One of those options could be sending in ground forces to secure important sites, especially around the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, more dramatic new video coming in from Central Command showing U.S. strikes destroying military targets of Iran's regime. Take a look at this. They're also dropping new photos for us of the new A-10 Thunderbolt II in action. Here's Mark Thiessen.
How does this thing end? It ends with no nuclear weapons, no nuclear fissile material, no ballistic missile program, no massacring protesters, right? And so how do you enforce that? You put the regime in a vice grip.
So because of the regime's near total ban on outside media, video from inside Iran is rare. Here's some, though, that shows the aftermath of U.S.-Israeli strikes as they continue to hammer regime targets in Tehran and beyond. Our chief national security correspondent, Jennifer Griffin, is in Washington now with the very latest on what's going on. Hi, Jen.
Hi, Aisha. Well, the U.S. is sending about 1,500 additional troops. The commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, Major General Brandon Tegmeyer, along with elements of his headquarters staff, is expected to deploy to the Middle East soon. The 82nd Airborne is your ready force. U.S. officials have indicated ground forces could be used to take Iran's Karg Island or its highly enriched uranium, but publicly signaling these kinds of troop movements and naming the potential targets represents a lapse in operational security and could just be a negotiating tactic.
We see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs.
I said, Pete and General Raisin Kane, I think this thing's going to be settled very soon. Here they go. Oh, that's too bad. Pete didn't want it to be settled. They were not interested in settlement. They were interested in just winning this thing.
The A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft have been used to destroy the countless small holes that are used to drop mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Very little, however, to threaten the strait.
It would be hard. Once a week.
Right.
And then people go, well, I don't know what day they're going to strike somebody, so I'm not going to let my ships go now.
General Stan McChrystal fought the insurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan for more than a decade and warns that the Iranians still have the asymmetric advantage. Aisha.
Okay, Jen Griffin live for us. Jen, thank you.
Trump administration turns up the pressure on Iran. New questions about who's really calling the shots in Tehran. Some people now say power may be shifting away from the clerics and into the hands of the military. Here's former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren, on America Reports yesterday.
We believe here that the people the president is talking to are actually in the military and the IRGC, and they're the people who are actually calling the shots in Iran now. And if so, they're not clerics, they're not theologians, and maybe they'll be more practical.
All right, well, perhaps they will, perhaps they won't. With me now, Dr. Masa Tehrani, U.S. advisor to the National Union for Democracy in Iran. She fled Iran as a child, first to Turkey and then here to the United States. Doc, good to see you this afternoon.
Great to see you.
So you've been in touch with patients in Tehran. You heard from one just in recent hours.
Yes.
We've done a translation here, talking about who's in charge, what the leadership might be, who the president is talking to, and how the Iranian people feel about that. Let's listen here.
Many think there are two possibilities. Either it hits our power infrastructure and things get much worse. Some think no, Trump will cut a deal with someone like Ghalibaf and end it without continuing. But we know one thing. If the war ends without incident, the Islamic Republic will torment us even more and tighten its grip.
The exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. You know, it was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country. Yeah.
Blue slips, Mr. President. Leader Thune doesn't seem like he wants to get rid of blue slips. Will there be consequences for the Senate?
Well, I think they should get rid of blue slips because as a Republican president, I am unable to put anybody in office having to do with U.S. attorneys or having to do with judges. In other words, if you have one, not two, you don't need two, just one. If you have one Democrat senator, where we have a lot of them, you have one Democrat senator in a state, it is not possible to appoint, because of blue slips, a judge. It's not possible to appoint a U.S. attorney. You see that happening. And I think it's a disgrace. I think blue slips are a disgrace. They've long since, I mean, they should not be relevant anymore. This is a different world than it was 15, 20 years ago. You know, that was a gentleman and gentlewoman world.